friends, and thank you for joining us. It's an exciting time right now because we're heading towards the last one third of the Gita. We've been in it for some time. And as you know, chapter 18 is the last one. We're now in chapter 14. Chapter 13, 14, and 15 are fairly interesting. I've gotten a lot more response from people about these chapters than I did the earlier ones. Lou, how are you doing?
Chapter 14 has been killer so far. I can't wait.
Yeah, we're talking about the Gunas for those who are just joining us. I would recommend, because right now we're going to be starting verse 5, I would recommend if you've not watched or listened to the earlier episodes, we're at episode 145 now, you should really listen to the last two or three where we start chapter 14 in order to understand what we're talking about.
Yes.
So today we're going to be talking about verse 5. Verse 5 in the Gita says, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. These gunas or qualities, born of Prakriti or matter, bind the indestructible embodied to the body. So the indestructible embodied in the body refers to what we know is the Atman.
Yes.
Atman, self, consciousness, God, life itself is embodied in our own bodies, right? So he's saying that, Krishna says that these gunas, these three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, which we talked at length about in previous episodes, are born of Prakriti or matter. And they bind the Atman to the body. So what does that mean? We will see. I think you'll find this pretty interesting. So imagine we've talked about Brahman, Atman, God, consciousness, life itself. It is omnipotent. It is everywhere. We've talked about all these different descriptions of the Atman. And it is absolutely stainless. It has no qualities as such. You cannot see it, you cannot touch it, you cannot feel it, you cannot imagine it. It has no shape. It is no nothing. It is just consciousness, pure consciousness. How can you describe pure consciousness? It's like saying, describe a thought. You don't, where does a thought come from? What does it look like? You don't know. You say, describe what is this material that the dream is made of? You don't know. You can describe the dream, but you can't describe of what the dream is made. Describe what a thought is made of. You can't.
Right. Yeah.
Describe a feeling. You can describe the feeling, but you can't describe what that feeling is made of. So similarly, Brahman, consciousness, you cannot describe. Consciousness, being conscious of what you see, you can describe the sight, but you can't describe consciousness. So Brahman has no shape, no matter, nothing to describe it. It's just as in Sanskrit say, Sat Chit Anand. So it can be described as consciousness, existence, bliss, happiness. So imagine fire, right? You see a big log of fire and it is on fire. You see the fire as producing manifest. You see it, manifest meaning seeing it as it is. You see fire as light. Through the fire, if the fire is in a dark night, you see light come emanating from the fire. You see heat. You feel the heat as you go closer to it. But in its unmanifest form, that log of wood, before it was set on fire, that log of wood, if you just look at it, you know that it's capable of fire. Mm-hmm. So in other words, the fire in that log is unmanifest. If you put a match to it and it starts to burn, then that fire becomes manifest. So keep that analogy in your mind and put it to one side while we talk about the Brahman and the similarities, okay? So the Brahman is unmanifest as pure consciousness. Mm-hmm. You cannot see it. You can, just like the fire in the wood, you cannot see it, you cannot perceive it, you cannot even think of it. It's hard to perceive. When that Brahman attaches itself to Prakriti or matter, and we'll talk about the difference between Purusha which is Brahman. Sorry that Sanskrit has so many names for Atman, Brahman, Purusha, self, God, consciousness. All of these are different names. I don't know why. But this goes back many tens of thousands of years. So different people, different ages came up with different names for it. So Purusha comes, Brahman comes and attaches itself to Prakriti or matter. And then, voila, an entity is born. It could be an insect, it could be a bird, it could be a reptile, it could be an animal, or it could be a human being. Each one of these entities, now that matter has life in it. That reptile, that little lizard can run. That elephant can bellow and push down a huge big tree. That human being can express himself. Why? Because there is that union between the Prakriti, the consciousness, and Purusha, the matter. Until that time, there's that union is not there. So Brahman is of two folds. One is Prakriti, one is Purusha in this instance. So once that Brahman attaches itself to Prakriti, then you can see a reptile that's squirreling away, moving away, or the human being talking, thinking, acting, having emotions. Then that Brahman has become manifest. That consciousness, that pure unconditioned consciousness, is now conditioned by the Prakriti, by the body, by the mind, by the intellect. I hope that's clear for all of you.
Much like, and we've used the example in the past, much like electricity attaches itself to a filament and becomes light, becomes a light bulb, or attaches itself to a heater and becomes heat, or attaches itself to an air conditioner and becomes cool.
That's right. Perfect.
Yeah.
So, Purusha or consciousness, Brahman, you can recognize within yourself, because you say, well, that's all well and good, but how do I know? How do I feel it? And that's, of course, to get to that point ultimately is to become self-realized. Then you realize yourself with a capital S. But until that time, you and I, at that level, way before self-realization, can recognize it by saying, I am. That where you say, I am, is the Purusha. That's the consciousness. So you know that your body changes. You remember when you were a child, you said, oh, you know what? When I was 5 years old, I remember that I fell off the bicycle and scraped my knee, right? We all say that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember your body at that time? You were like only 3 feet tall, 2 feet tall, however short you were, tall you were. You then can recognize what you look like. Then you say, oh, but when I was a teenager, I was really good on a bicycle. I was this, I was that, I was strong, I was able to ride a bike fast. Your body had changed. You remained the same. When you got to be an old person, you said, yeah, now I can't get on a bicycle. My knees are too weak. I'm too weak. I can't ride the bicycle. I get tired. You're still talking about the same I. That same I that you recognize was the child, the young adolescent, strong, the old person, weak to get on a bicycle. But the I remained the same. That I is the Purusha. That I is the Atman. That I is the consciousness that is untainted by the body or the mind or the intellect. So that I, the I am, is the Purusha in yourself. Keep recognizing that. That's where we have to get. And these qualities of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas basically are the ways in which you can get to the I. That's the way you can get to self-realization. And Buddha said that it's a very fine line because all three of them walk together. If you say, if I go on the path of Sattva, which is the purest, then I will reach the self much easier because it's much clearer when you are sattvic, of Sattva. But whenever you go on Sattva, you cannot go by itself because all three go together. On either side, one side is Rajas, one side is Tamas, and they contaminate that Sattva.
Right.
So the sense of I, the being conscious of your own being, the sense of I is Purusha, Atman. The experience, that which I experience is called Prakriti. So keep this in mind. What do you experience? All of that. Everything that you experience is Prakriti, or nature, the body, which we in chapter 13 called Kshetra, the field.
Right.
The knower of the field is the Purusha. Again, a different term, but the same meaning. The Purusha recognizes the Prakriti, the Kshetrajna recognizes the Kshetra, the field. The knower of the field knows the field. Now, that which you are conscious of is Prakriti, your body, matter. So that which I experience is called Prakriti. Whatever I experience through the senses, as well as the senses themselves, is Prakriti. Whatever you experience with the sense of sight, hearing, nose, taste, whatever you experience with that is matter, or Prakriti. The senses themselves, the five senses, the five organs, they're all Prakriti. That which you experience through your mind, emotions, is Prakriti. And the mind itself is Prakriti. That which you think of, imagine, develop as an idea through your intellect, and the intellect itself is Prakriti. You get it? So
Yeah.
I have knowledge. If I say I have knowledge, it means that I and knowledge are separate. I am separate, the knowledge is separate. So in that case, knowledge is Prakriti. But if I say I am knowledge, meaning consciousness itself is that knowledge, then that's not Prakriti. It's a little complicated, and doesn't matter if you don't know. I have happiness versus I am happiness, because consciousness in its purest form is happiness and knowledge. And that's really where sattva attaches itself to. Sattva attaches itself to Brahman, which is consciousness, which is happiness, and which is knowledge. So now you come to Prakriti, matter, all of the things that we described before. Prakriti has three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. Guna in Sanskrit means string. Interesting. Gunas means strings. Now, why did in Sanskrit gunas get the name of string? Because now we're talking about string theory, and I wish I knew more about string theory to explain it to you. But what little I knew, if I start to talk about it, it'll confuse you even more. So if you know something about string theory, tell me. I'd love to know. But gunas, rajas, sattva, rajas, tamas are all strings, and they vibrate, just like strings vibrate. And those gunas, when they vibrate, they produce matter. That may seem a little confusing, but after all, our bodies are made of atoms, molecules. Inside that are vibrating and moving at great speed electrons, protons, neutrons. What do those atoms, electrons, and neutrons consist of? What are they made of? That's the key. That all of this world is made of these gunas vibrating at different speeds. That's fascinating to me.
It is.
So the mind, if you say, well, where's your mind? What does it look like? In your anatomy class, if they said, well, what does your mind look like? You can say what the brain looks like.
Right.
You can dissect the skull, take out the brain, and you say it weighs so much, it looks like this much, it has sulci, it has gyri. But what does the mind look like? The mind has no appearance.
Right.
What does a thought look like? What does a dream look like? You can't describe it because you don't know what a thought looks like. You don't know what the mind looks like. But the Sanskrit scriptures say that thoughts, dreams, the whole mind, the intellect, is all nothing but gunas. The vibration of gunas produces the mind, the thoughts, the dreams, and the intellect. So
it's fascinating how these thoughts of the ancients have played out in these days. Like you said, leading us, we're basically walking into string theory.
that's right.
We're
That's right.
yeah.
Do you know much about the string theory, Lou?
Not enough to pass knowledge along here, but
Same with me. Same with me.
Composition of the universe in theory, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what the Gita is saying. That's what the Upanishad said.
Yeah.
That the strings, which are gunas, are basically the composition of the all Prakriti, all matter is composed of gunas, which are strings. So all thoughts, desires, the whole mind itself, the emotions are coming from the gunas. So where is the mind? Where are thoughts? Where are dreams? We said, I'm just repeating, all gunas. You may say, I find that hard to believe. Now, look at your TV screen, right? You have a huge TV screen, 72 inches, 90 inches big, and you're looking at it fascinated as you're watching a movie, or you're watching National Geographic, you see this lion jumping on a deer in bright color. You go to Best Buy or some electronic store to watch TVs. You're fascinated by how real it looks. You say, this looks lifelike. But if you dissect that TV and you look inside, what is it? It's all small little pixels
Yep.
that are moving at great speed in order to produce color. I don't know much about electronics, and Lou, if you do, jump in here. But
TV is just a bunch of dots.
it's just a bunch of dots. I mean, you can call them pixels, and maybe that's not the right term, but whatever it is, those little dots shining very fast produce the image of a lion, a tree, different colors. And they say, this is so many pixels and so many HDs, and it has bright color and looks so lifelike. That's exactly what gunas do. Gunas within the world, by vibrating in sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic terms, produce us as matter, produce the world, produce all these, not just colors as on TV, but actual human beings, elephants, trees, all of matter. So that's very fascinating to me. The nature of the three gunas, their roles, how they function, is what's going to be described in the next few verses. And this is just an introduction today about what these things are. But sattva is the best, it is the purest. Rajas, tamas contaminate the sattva. If you walk the path of sattva, if you could do that, you would be so pure, you'd reach self realization in this one lifetime. But because, as Buddha said, it is a razor's edge to walk that, because as you're walking, there's sattva in the middle where you're walking, but rajas on one side, tamas on one side. You could fall very quickly on either side, depending on two things: the environment that you're in and the company that you keep. So that's very, very interesting. We'll talk about that more in the next episode. But just in brief, if you are a very sattvic person and you go to a bar, a nightclub where there's a lot of music and dancing and flashing lights, you're going to be very tempted to do the same. If you go, so you could be very sattvic and you go to this nightclub with all the dancing and music and everything else, you're going to become less sattvic just by being in that surrounding.
Right.
And similarly, if you go and sit right next to a Buddha, a true self-realized person, his vibrations, his vibes of peace and happiness are so good that you would also tend to say, okay, I feel just as calm and sattvic as the master with whom I'm sitting. So when you cleanse your personality, each one of our personalities has sattva, rajas, and tamas. When you cleanse your personality of rajas and tamas, the sattva shines forth. So in your thinking, in your manana, your reflections, your thought process, you become more sattvic. That doesn't mean that your rajas and tamas goes away completely.
Yeah.
You may not become self-realized, but if you move even a fraction, a small distance away from where you started, you've achieved a lot. Your mind becomes clearer, you become much more peaceful, you become calmer, and your body also. You tend to then say, okay, listen, I don't like this rajasic food, I don't like tamasic food, I tend to feel more clean when I eat sattvic food. So as a result, your body becomes healthier, your body becomes cleaner, you become purer, and it is experienced by others around you. They say that sattvic people actually have a glow about them. They say that they have an aura around their head or an aura around their body that other people can perceive. So if you had, how when you go to the ophthalmologist I just went, I got new glasses. They put like filters in front of your eyes, and they say, can you see clearly now? And you
Right.
say, yeah, it's a little clearer than without the glasses. They say, take this glass out there. How about this? You say, this is a little better. They take that out, put that back. And you say, this is not as clear. Or this is the clearest.
Right.
So when you have a lot of sattva as your glasses, as your lens in front of you, you can see clarity in terms of the Atman, Brahman, very much more clearly. Very clearly, because you're sattvic, you're pure, your mind is pure, your reflections are pure, everything is getting to be clearer. And by following these paths, you tend to become more sattvic. Rajas means all activity, desire-ridden activity. When you have rajas, you're so focused on your activity, do, I've got to do this, I've got to do this, I've got to accumulate more. All of that tends to cloud your ability to see or even think of or contemplate getting to be self-realized. That becomes you become wrapped up in that. So that's what that other side of that razor's edge. And tamas is deep sleep. Tamas is laziness, inertia. And when you're in tamas, you're so steeped in inaction, inertia, lethargy, ignorance, that you cannot see the self at all. You're least visible. It's like putting blinders over your eyes. So those are the three, sattva, rajas, tamas, just an introduction. And hopefully we will see you next time so we can talk in depth about sattva and rajas. Hope you find this interesting. Oh, by the way, Lou, we have a new email that people can write to me on. My son actually suggested that we have a separate email, because I don't get notifications when emails are sent to Facebook or whatever. So if you go to, the email is Gita Memoirs of a Psychiatrist @gmail.com. And if you go to the Facebook page, Gita Memoirs of a Psychiatrist, you'll see it as Lou has written right on the bottom.
Yep.
So it's Gita, Gita, Memoirs, MEMOIRS, of a Psychiatrist @gmail.com.
Sure.
And I will respond to you as quickly as I can.
And
Lou, anything you need to add?
No, we'll put it on all our audio podcasts as well, so people have a way to reach us other than going through Facebook. But Facebook is a great way to reach us as well. Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. You can find us everywhere, and we hope you join us and contact us, because we love hearing from you.
Yeah, it's all thanks to Lou.
All right. And we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you. Bye-bye, friends.